If you're nervous about navigating the airport for the first time, I totally get it. Finding the right check-in counter, avoiding issues in the airport security line, finding your gate without getting lost, making through immigration and customs, all this can sound overwhelming if you've never done this before. So on my flight today, I'll take you through the entire process step by step to help put your mind at ease and avoid easy mistakes. But before we go into the airport, there's some important things you need to know before you arrive. First, you need to check your email for your flight confirmation number, and then 24 to 48 hours before your flight, do online check-in either on the airline's website or the airline's app. Sometimes one works better than the other. While you're at it, make sure to check your specific airline's baggage and luggage weight and size requirements because they differ among the airlines, and make sure that your luggage actually fits within those limits, because if you end up needing to buy more luggage, it's much cheaper to do it now than once you get to the airport. Another good idea is to weigh your bags at home and distribute your weight between the different bags to make sure you're under the weight limits. This is much less stressful than having to do that in the front of the line at the airport with a bunch of people waiting for you. If you need more space to pack but don't want to pay extra, check out this playlist next, where I have tons of clever travel hacks to avoid carry-on luggage fees. One of my favorite tricks is to use a vest like this with a bunch of interior hidden pockets where you can basically jam a bunch of stuff and fit almost an entire bag's worth of stuff, which I actually did in this video. While you're at it, since this is your first time flying, you need to know what's allowed to pack and what's prohibited, which can be a little bit confusing because carry-ons are different from check bags, so make sure to check the TSA website before you leave. Double check to make sure that you have all of your documents, your passport, your visa if you need one, any other documents. Sometimes the airlines send out a list of requirements that you need. Other times you might have to do your own research. Okay, so to actually find your terminal at the airport can be tricky depending on how big the airport is, because sometimes there's tons of different terminals. So before you leave, make sure to look up online which terminal your airline operates out of, whether domestic or international flights. Sometimes if you just search in Google Maps, it'll give you different options for different terminals and say which airlines leave from each terminal. Or other times, if you're using Uber, for example, they'll do the same thing. But if it's a small airport like the one I'm at right now, there isn't really that many different places. There's just one domestic area right here and one international area over here. Usually need to arrive more early for international flights than domestic flights, but I always like to give myself plenty of time. This is especially true if it's your first time in the airport, because you may get lost or may have some problems, and so having plenty of buffer time reduces your stress and makes everything more smooth. If it's a small airport and just a domestic flight, you might only need to get there 2 hours early, but I just like to get there 3 to 4 hours early no matter what, because I just like to chill, go through the process slow. If there's any problems, I'm not worried about it, and if I end up getting through super easy and I have tons of extra time to spare, then I just go to the lounge and relax or work or make videos for you. The one exception to arriving super early would be if your flight is already early in the morning. For example, on one of my first flights, I was leaving a tiny airport in Grand Rapids, and the flight was like at 6 in the morning, so I thought, oh, I need to get there at 3 in the morning. But none of the workers were even there, and so I was literally the only person there except the janitor, and I was just sitting there waiting. So if it's a small airport and it's a super early flight, then I wouldn't go more than 3 hours early, because even the check-in workers might not be there yet. If you're driving yourself, there's sometimes parking at the actual airport or around the airport. There's parking lots that can be cheaper. Then you can take a free shuttle to whichever terminal you need to. Just be careful when parking at these airport parking lots that you don't leave any valuables in your car and you don't have your registration with your home address on there, because airport parking lots can be targets for thieves sometimes. And if you're thinking about taking a bus or metro or public transportation, just keep in mind how much luggage you're carrying, because if it's packed, then it's going to be hard to handle all your luggage. Once you're inside the airport, the first step is to go to the check-in counter, and this can be a little bit confusing because sometimes you need to go there and sometimes you don't, and sometimes you can use a self-kiosk and don't need to actually talk to a person, and so it's a little bit confusing. If they're available, I like using these self-serve kiosks, and I'll tell you why in a second. But if they're not available, you just have to look at all these signs along the walls to find your airline and then wait in line. If you need to go up to the counter, you're gonna wait in line, and then they're gonna ask for your passport and look at your passport. If you have bags, they may ask you to put your check bag or sometimes even your carry-on on a scale to weigh it to make sure you're not over the weight limits. If you are over the weight limits, they'll hit you with a big old fee. That's why I prefer the self-serve kiosk, because you can kind of finagle the system a little bit better if you're a little bit overweight. At the check-in counter or kiosk, you're also gonna get your boarding pass, which you need to keep safe, and if your check checking luggage, they'll give you a little tag to hold onto that matches the luggage tag that they put on the luggage that you're checking. If you don't have any checked luggage and you already checked in online, and when you checked in online, they give you a digital boarding pass, then you can skip this whole process and skip to the next step. That said, sometimes they do require you to go to the check-in counter, even if you're not checking a bag. A lot of times this is if they want to look to see if you have a visa or that you have proof of onward travel. If this is the case, when you do online check-in, it'll give you a message telling you to go to the check-in counter when you arrive at the airport. If you do have checked luggage, but you were able to get your boarding pass online, then sometimes they have a special line just for bag drops. So you don't have to wait in the long line to do check-in. You can just go to the bag drop line, drop off your bag, and then continue. Next, you need to find the security checkpoint, which is where I'm going right now. And to do this, you look at the boarding pass that you got and check what your gate is. Then look around for departure signs that have your gate number. Sometimes in small airports like where I am right now, there's no exact gate numbers and there's just one departure where everyone goes through the same security. At this point, before you get in the line to go through security, you're going to either want to dump or drink your water bottle, because most airport securities don't allow you to carry more than 100 milliliters of liquid in, and some don't have places where you can dump your liquids out. Some airports, the line to go through security can be super long, which is another reason why you want to get here early. Right now, there's nobody in line, so I'm just going to fly right through. When you get to the front of the security line, you're going to need to show your ID and boarding pass to the officer, and then they'll let you pass through into the security area. By the way, depending on the airport and where you're flying, this line might also lead you to immigration, either before or after the security. Immigration leaving the country is usually pretty simple as long as you haven't overstayed your time, and sometimes there's not even an immigration officer anymore. You just scan your passport yourself and walk through. The screening process itself should be easy peasy, because I know you're going to watch this video on carry-on packing mistakes to avoid, so you don't make any big mistakes. When you're waiting in line to go through security, you have some prep work to do, like taking everything out of all of your pockets and putting your valuables all together in some sort of zipped up pocket. I like either putting it all together in a fanny pack or in this vest pockets here. A lot of items go missing in airport security, so don't leave your valuables out loosey-goosey in the bins. Every airport is a little bit different and has different rules, so listen to what they're yelling out. But in many airports, you're gonna have to remove your shoes, your watch, your belt, any coats or big clothes. If you have a laptop, you have to take that out. So just listen for directions. You can ask the agents there if you're not sure, or you can just watch what other people are doing. If everyone else is taking off your shoes, then you probably have to take off your shoes. When it's your turn to go through, it can be a little stressful if you have a lot of stuff. You just need to pick up some of the bins, however many you need, and load your things into it. If you take your laptop out, keep that in a separate bin. If you have your fanny pack, put that next to it. I like to cover things with my jacket just so things are harder to grab for sticky fingers. Then what you want to do is stand next to your bin and don't push it through the X-ray machine until you're ready to go through the body scanner, because sometimes people push it through early and then the line gets held up and then all your valuables are going to be on the other side of the X-ray machine and you won't be able to see them. Different airports use different types of body scanner technology. Some of them just have normal metal detectors, and so if you can't go through a metal detector for some reason, just tell the officer and he'll show you where you need to go to get a manual pat down instead. Once you get through, collect all your belongings and make sure that you have everything. This is why it's important to keep everything together, because you can quickly make sure everything is there and you're not missing anything. And if you're selected for additional screening, don't panic. This is why you got here early, so you don't be stressed. They may just need to look for something in your bag that they saw on the X-ray scanner and verify that it's allowed. So just stay calm and be polite and you'll be okay. Give this video a like if you're finding it helpful so far, and subscribe for more tricks on how to travel smarter. Okay, so as soon as you make it through security, you're going to want to first look for one of these big screens to check on your flight status to see if it's delayed or on time, and make sure that your gate hasn't changed, because sometimes it'll change from what it's printed on your boarding pass. This airport here literally has no one in it, and so it's super easy, but if you're in a big airport, this might be a giant screen with tons of different flights. And if you are in a giant airport, then there's probably going to be signs everywhere pointing to where your gate's going to be, so just follow the signs. You may have to walk for a while. In addition to the signs, sometimes it's also helpful, you can check on Google Maps and see maps of the airport and where different restaurants or cafes or lounges are, or sometimes the airline's apps also have maps. This requires internet, so you may need to connect to the airport's free Wi-Fi, which may be vulnerable to hackers looking to steal your sensitive information. The risk of this happening is low nowadays that most websites use HTTPS, but the risk is not zero. And that personally makes me a little bit nervous when it comes to protecting things like my bank account and life savings. Since I'm not a super hacker genius and I don't want to accidentally do something wrong or accidentally click something that I'm not supposed to or accidentally not see
a warning message that I'm supposed to see. I just play it safe and pay a couple bucks a month for a VPN for an extra layer of security whenever I'm doing sensitive stuff. I personally use NordVPN, who's kind enough to sponsor this video. NordVPN also allows you to access websites that are blocked in certain other countries, including some banking websites that you would not want to get locked out of when you're on the other side of the world. And it also unlocks the ability to use streaming services like Netflix when you're abroad. For 74% off NordVPN plus 4 months free, use the discount link down in the description or on the screen.
When you're waiting at your gate, you want to pay attention to the announcements in case they change your gate. And if they do, sometimes you also get notifications on your phone, emails, or if you have the app, they might notify you. So it's good to stay alert in case anything changes. And if you have any questions, once it gets closer to your boarding time, you can go up and there's a gate agent at the counter. You can ask them any questions, or if your flight is delayed for some reason and you're worried about making your next connection, you can go up and ask them what they recommend. When boarding time starts, you're also going to want to listen to the announcements because they're going to announce different groups, and you have to check on your boarding pass which group you're in. In the past, I used to just wait to the last second to board so I wouldn't have to wait in the huge line and can just relax and chill at my gate and then be the last person to walk on. But I don't do that anymore because there's a big downside to this, which I'll get to in a second. When your boarding starts, it's a good opportunity to take your last bathroom break or pick up any snacks if you need them. You can usually use the bathroom on the plane during the boarding process, but once you start takeoff, you won't be able to get out of your seat for a little while. Sometimes at the boarding gate, they have sizing bins where you have to fit in your carry-on or personal item to make sure it's the correct size. And if it doesn't fit, they're gonna hit you with some stupidly expensive luggage fees. So if you wanna avoid that, make sure to watch this video. When you're waiting to board, make sure that you have your boarding pass in your hand so you don't hold up the line because they're gonna scan it for you to go through. After that, you usually walk through a little ramp, board the plane, find your seat, store your carry-on in the overhead bin above, and your personal item under your seat in front of you. Before we get into the arrival process, I know that we've covered a lot of information so far, and so if you want a step-by-step checklist of everything you need to do in the airport, I made a free download that you can grab in the description. At the check-in counter, I'm always super nice to the check-in people, and then I ask them if they need help in the emergency exit row, and look what I got for free. Okay, so now you've arrived in your destination, and I'm going to assume that you don't have any layovers. If you do have layovers, I'll cover that in a second because there's some important things you need to know. But let's say you've arrived in your final destination. At the end of your flight, they might hand out these little flyers of paper that you need to fill out, and these are for when you're passing through customs. If they don't hand these out, then you might have to fill them out later, and in some airports, you don't have to fill them out at all. You want to always read these papers carefully to make sure you don't have anything that you're supposed to declare. This could be if you're carrying a bunch of cash with you, or foods, or other sorts of things. And once your plane actually lands, please don't be that guy or that lady who gets up and rushes to stand in the aisle and get their overhead bin luggage out, and then they end up having to sit there all cramped up together for like 20 minutes waiting to get off the plane. Just sit in your seats and relax and wait for people to start getting off the plane. As soon as you get into the airport, just start looking for these signs and follow the signs that say baggage claim or immigration. There's going to be tons of signs and it should be impossible to get lost. Passing through immigration can be a little bit intimidating sometimes, especially when you're entering in the US and some other countries. And so all you have to do is hand them your passport and your boarding pass. Sometimes this process is super easy, but other times they'll really grill you and ask you tons of questions, and it can be a little bit scary. So if you're scared, watch this video next where I tell you how to answer the questions to not get in trouble. After you make it through immigration, you just keep following the path and the signs that say baggage claim, and it'll take you to the baggage carousels where you can pick up any checked luggage if you have any. Sometimes on your flight, they'll announce which baggage carousel to go to, which number, and if not, you'll just have to walk around and look on the signs that are above the baggage carousels. Right after you pass through the luggage carousels, then you'll have to go through customs, and it's different in every airport. Sometimes there's nobody there. Sometimes there's two different pathways. One will say, I have things to declare, and the other one will say nothing to declare. And other times there might be a little mini x-ray machine where you have to put your big bag in the x-ray machine. And so just follow what everyone else does and you should be fine. That said, be careful if you have snacks packed with you, if you have fruits or nuts or things like that, because sometimes those aren't allowed in the country and you can get in trouble if you have those in your bag. Okay, before we talk about the process of actually leaving the airport, let's talk about those layovers and what you need to know. Okay, so if you do have a layover, this layover is going to look a lot different depending on how long your connection time is. But no matter how long your layover, your first step is to check one of those screens again to see which terminal and gate that your flight flies out of. It might not have your gate yet if you're super early, but you should at least know which terminal you need to be in. On my flight, on the seatback entertainment screens, there's actually an option to check your gates that became available near the end of our flight. And so sometimes you can just check check your gates before you even land. But even if you do see this on your flight, I'd still check at the screens once you do land because you never know if it changed. If your connection time is under 90 minutes, that means you're gonna wanna giddy up and not dilly-dally and walk fast to your next gate. If it's a big airport, you need to change terminals, look to see if there are shuttles that take you to the different terminals. Even if you're hungry or you have to go to the bathroom, I would prioritize getting to your gate first and then figuring out the bathroom. And if it's a super tight connection, there may even be staff waiting for you when you get off the plane with signs to your destination, and they can usually help you get to your next gate faster so you don't miss your flight. I say usually because one time I trusted in one of these helpers to get me to my right gate, and he brought me to the wrong gate on the wrong side of the airport and ended up missing my flight. So even if someone's there to help you, still make sure to check those screens to make sure you're going to the right gate. If you have a long layover, then you have a little bit more flexibility. I have a credit card that gives me free VIP lounge access around the world, and so I always just go straight to the lounge. If you have a long layover and are going to buy a meal at the airport anyways, then it might not be a huge difference to just get lounge access where you could be more comfortable. That said, not all lounges are created equal, and some airports are actually pretty nice outside of the lounges, so you just have to kind of decide. Some airports are actually really interesting, and you might not even want to go to the lounge anyway. Some have sleep and rest areas or entertainment options like shopping and even museums. This is another one of your opportunities to charge your devices if you need to, although I recommend using a power bank instead of the charging stations because sometimes those charging stations aren't always safe, and I explain why in this video. If it's a really long layover, you may even be able to store your bag somewhere in the airports and lockers and then go out and explore the city and then come back to the airport. There are a couple of important extra steps you need to know about if your connection is in a different country though. First is that you'll have to go through customs and immigration. This is the case if your layover is in the same country as your final destination. For example, if I were traveling from the United States to Colombia and I had a layover in Cartagena, Colombia, but I wanted to go to Medellin, Colombia, then I would go through customs and immigration in Cartagena. In some countries, when you're going through customs, you need to fill out a little piece of paper. Sometimes they'll give it to you in the flight itself, and sometimes you have to pick it up in the customs area, and other times you don't have to do it at all. Immigration, you just have to give them your passport and boarding pass, and they'll probably ask you a couple questions about your trip. Another thing you may have to do if you have checked bags is you might have to claim your bag once you fly into the new country and then recheck it, redrop it off. If you have a layover like this, then to be certain, I would ask your gate agent or you can ask the flight attendant what the process is just so there's no confusion. Depending on the airport, you may also have to pass through the security area again, but that's usually the same process as what we already went over. On your layover, you also want to keep in mind the change in time zone so you don't get confused. So make sure to update your watch, update your phone so that there's no confusion and you don't miss any flights. Okay, we finally made it. My back hurts a little bit. Once you finally make it through customs, you'll go out to the normal public area where you'll probably see a bunch of different people waiting with signs and things like that. And there'll also be tons of signs that tell you where the transportation is and where you go if you have a connection and all those things. The first thing I like to do, which I'm going to do right now, is go find an ATM so I can have a little bit of the local currency. This is the best way to take out money, especially if you have a Charles Schwab free checking account. But whatever you do, don't exchange your money at those currency exchange places because you'll get ripped off big time. It's a good idea to have your transportation plan figured out before you actually take your flight. So while I was waiting for my last flight, I just did some quick research to see what the best way is to get to my hotel, if they have Uber or other rideshare apps, or if there's buses or whatever. Right now it's super late, so I'm just going to take an Uber. Sometimes they have specific designated areas where you get the rideshare apps like Uber, and so you might have to walk a little bit to find that area. There also should be signs for taxi stands or car rentals or shuttles that go into the city. You just have to follow the signs. You may have noticed that I skipped the entire part of the flight itself, and as a first-time flyer, there's definitely some things that you should know when you're actually in the plane. So to learn how to survive long-haul flights, even if you're stuck in economy like I just was, watch this video next. I share some insider tricks to make flying super comfortable that I've learned over the past 9 years traveling the world almost nonstop. All right guys, like, subscribe, do the things. Love you. Time to go to sleep. Bye-bye.